This video is for students who are doing day 16 of Unit 3, which is about how labor unions responded to industrialization, and continuing our emphasis on perspective and historical narratives. This video will give you an overview of the lesson, some helpful hints along the way, and some models that can be used to self-assess your work. Just a friendly reminder that the assessment for this unit will be writing a historical narrative about the progress and decline of American society between the years 1865 and 1920. So we are going to be keeping an eye out for evidence of progress and decline as well. This lesson starts off asking you to recollect two terms that are very important to this lesson, but you may not have thought about them, in quite some time. Those words are organized labor and union. And there are two things I would do to kind of jog the memory of my own students. First, I would show them this photograph that I found on the Library of Congress website and explain the context that the Teamsters, which we can see if we look closely at the posters, the Teamsters is an example of a union that is made up of mostly truck drivers, chauffeurs, and even some factory workers. And in this photograph, they were holding a rally outside of City Hall in New York City. I would instruct my students to pay close attention to the signs that these individuals were holding. Now, this photograph is from the 1950s. And again, I found this photograph by doing an image search on the Library of Congress's site. And I looked for the word union. And I would encourage you to do the same, because the results that you find will definitely help you develop your understanding of both of these terms. However, there are also much more modern examples that could lead to you developing your understanding of both union and organized labor. So second, in addition to looking at images related to both terms, I would have my students go and do an internet search for both, one term, one at a time, and click on the news tab of whatever search engine you are using. And this is going to provide you with much more current examples. And you even might add terms to narrow your results to make them more relevant to you and your interests. Like you might also add like New York City, or if there's a job that a friend or a family member has, and you'd be interested to see if there is any organized labor related to that, you can also add that job to the end of your search result too. Because these terms are a huge part of today's lesson, I would pause this video here and take a few minutes to construct your own definitions. When you are done, unpause it, and you'll be able to check yours against a model that I created. So, okay, here you see, and I'll move this, here you see my model for both terms, and while yours may be fairly different, there should be some commonalities, such as with organized labor, it's really the workers joining together, which is kind of based on the idea of strength in numbers, opposing business owners and managers to pursue a set of ideals. Usually, it's wages, hours, benefits, and workplace safety. Unions are the actual organizations that workers join. So now that we have a fuller understanding of both of these terms, let's get into the meat of this lesson. We start out by examining this cartoon, The Protectors of Our Industries, and I'm going to go ahead and pull up a high-def version that they have at the Library of Congress site. Now, when looking at a political cartoon, I always remind my students of the importance of the words that appear in and out of the image. And if you look at this closely, you can see all these different individuals and other objects that are labeled. But we also see the title here at the bottom. And as you analyze this image, I would recommend that you kind of imagine dividing it into like 4 sections and then going through each section one at a time. And for each one, really focusing on the details of that specific section and then moving on to the next. And I want you to come back and really look at this title again. And you might start figuring out the significance of the title there. And taking these steps will really guide your response to this third question that we have for you that's going to kind of guide your understanding about this. The next part of this is to watch these 2 videos. Now, both of these videos, they present us with some very powerful images. So it is really important that we just don't listen to what the narrators and historians being interviewed say, but it's also incredibly important that we also take note about the images that we are being presented with. And doing so is definitely going to allow us to make deeper realizations and also more meaningful wonderings, which are actually then going to make your responses to the 3 CFU questions that follow this much more substantive. So after watching the videos, and here's the space to record what you hear, what you saw, what you realized, and what you wondered. Like I said, there are some check for understanding questions about the historical circumstances and the perspectives of the workers who organized. That's going to lead us to start examining 2 of the more influential labor unions of this time. First, you're going to look at the Knights of Labor, and second, you're going to be looking at the American Federation of Labor. And yes, both of these labor unions have much in common. However, if you read closely, you are going to find several significant differences between them as well. And if you are struggling with this part, I would reread both and keep an eye out for the goals, the methods, and the membership requirements of each. And what you realize here by thinking about those 3 things will likely inform your responses to these 2 last questions. We then move on to the primary source component of this lesson, which is taken from Samuel Gompers, who was the founder and president of that second union you just read about, the American Federation of Labor. And to really prepare you for the culminating assignment for this lesson, it's really important that you annotate for these 3 components, and each one we gave a different color to. You want to look for the historical circumstances, the perspective, and also evidence of progress or decline. And if you are still working on familiarizing yourself with the language of perspective, ask your teacher to make the language of perspective tool available to you. You may also find it useful when you're creating your written response to the wrap-up question at the end of this lesson as well. If you are doing this asynchronously, like outside of class on your own, I recommend you pause this video and do the annotations on your own. When you are done, unpause the video and compare yours to the model I'm about to display. So now that you are done with yours, here's what mine turned out like. And just so you know, yes, this is a subjective process. And what you might have put as perspective, I might have counted as a historical circumstance. So yours does probably look a bit different from mine. And if you'd like to test your social studies skills about these 3 social studies components, see if you can put yourself in my shoes and see if you can explain why I color-coded things the way I did. And doing this, it really should put you in a good position to come up with some very thoughtful responses to the 3 guiding questions that you have here. So now that you are done with yours, here's what mine turned out like. And just so you know, yes, this is a subjective process. And what you might have put as perspective, I might have counted as a historical circumstance. So yours does probably look a bit different from mine. And if you'd like to test your social studies skills about these 3 social studies components, see if you can put yourself in my shoes and see if you can explain why I color-coded things the way I did. And doing this, it really should put you in a good position to come up with some very thoughtful responses to the 3 guiding questions that you have here. All right, so now that we've done everything, we've looked at the cartoon, the videos, the tertiary texts on the 2 labor unions, and then we just read that Samuel Gompers piece and you recorded your answers over here. Now we are ready to consider how all of this impacts our perspective on whether this historical era was one of progress or decline for American society. Now remember, you've been asked the same question at the end of the last several lessons, and the point is for you to consider how each new layer of what you've learned impacts your thinking on this question. So before we tackle that final question yet again, let's think about what we've learned in the past few lessons. And we're going to use this table to kind of organize our thoughts. So I went back through those lessons where we were considering progress and decline. And these are kind of the main topics for each one. And these are just acting as a reminder for you. You need to go back to each of these and look at the actual evidence and then place that evidence in the appropriate column. And from here, all that's left, once your table is nice and organized, all that's left is for you to kind of take all that into consideration and respond to this question. Was the Gilded Age a period of progress or decline?